A ban on golden passports in Malta is set to be overwhelmingly approved by MEPs. A price hike in food prices is expected as countries begin hoarding goods, and a Luxembourg road has been renamed after Daphne Caruana Galizia. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo. Johnathan, Cilia here, joined by David, Grech, Urpani. We've got the latest updates as far as how the Russia-Ukraine crisis will be affecting Malta, as well as the latest developments from the 2022 general election campaign trail. Stay tuned to the end of today's episode. We've got a special guest in the building, PN candidate Emma Portelli Bonnici. But before that, David is here with details on the top story. David.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening. It's been another extremely busy week as far as national and international news goes. And in fact, this first headline takes us back to how both of them can actually end up affecting each other. In fact, a proposal to ban golden passport and residency schemes, quite similar to the ones that we have in Malta, is said to be overwhelmingly approved by the European Parliament. This was revealed earlier today by lead reporter Sophie Intervelt. It's all about these amendments to this wide-ranging legislative report. It's already been approved by political groups, so it's definitely expected to have, significant majority of MEPs voting in favour. It calls for golden passports, like Malta Citizenship by Investment Scheme, to be phased out by 2025. Now, of course, there's also other things that will be addressed. There's the golden residency, the visa programs, and even specific measures targeting anti-money laundering. Also, speaking of, this very controversial scheme that keeps on coming up, Intervelt also rubbished Maltese authorities' claims that our IIP scheme is not a golden passport. She said people are still buying citizenship and officials are engaging in spin. So, quite an incendiary, quite a massive claim there. She also urged the European Commission to act on this report, saying that this goes all the way back to 2017. It's been a long time coming, and even bringing up assassinated journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, seeing as she was one of the first to report on corruption in connection to the scheme. It's come back to the headlines all those years later.
The scheme has been controversial since it was first announced years ago. It is worth noting that since the pandemic hit, the government has often referred to the scheme as a place of funds for the infamous war chest that helped the country out through the pandemic with subsidies as well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of if Malta comes up with another scheme, another potentially controversial scheme to replace this if it does get phased out. Moving on to the next story, and on the topic of how international relations will be affecting Malta, the price of foods, the price of daily goods such as wheat is set to rise over the next coming months and years if this Ukrainian-Russia crisis continues to escalate. So we've been hearing more and more about this. In fact, Lovin Malta had spoken to the Foreign Affairs Minister, Evers Bartle, last week, who first told us about the issues with wheat. Now there's a bit of an update on that. We spoke to Malcolm Borge from the Dewa TV, someone who's very close to Malta's farming community, and he said, guys, listen, there's a serious problem here, and it's a twofold problem. So he said the first problem is that a lot of Maltese producers rely on Ukraine and Russia for basics like cereals and wheats. He referred to the area as the breadbasket of the world, which goes to show just how important Ukraine and Russia is as far as giving the items needed to make bread around the world is. So if the prices go up there, people who create bread, we're talking about people who make ftira in Malta, Hobzat al-Malti, they will be affected massively by this. Apart from this, it's not just bread, even milk can be affected by this, and milk means butter, cheeses, creams, all these kind of, dairy products will be affected as well. So it is really, really worrying. And Malcolm Borge said, listen, a lot of countries have reserves of these kind of ingredients, these raw ingredients. Malta is a bit of a tiny country, and by a bit I mean a lot of a tiny country, so our reserves might not be as big as countries like America, Russia or Ukraine.
Yeah, and seeing, because Russia and Ukraine are such massive and important producers of wheat, this could also affect the supply chains as far as, beef goes, because you're also affecting food for this type of meat. So it definitely it's looming on the horizon. I mean, it's only been 2 years since the people rushed to supermarkets in that craze for COVID, and quite honestly, I wasn't really looking forward to yet another one, but we will definitely keep you posted, even as far as Foreign Affairs Minister Evers Bartolo goes. We might have some interesting updates for you next week to look forward to. Meanwhile, beyond our shores for the rest of the month, if you're in Luxembourg and you're looking for Rue Pierre Becker, you're not exactly going to find it, because you're going to find Rue Daphne Caruana Galizia. That's right, yesterday it was announced on the occasion of International Women's Day that the road in Luxembourg will be renamed as a tribute to assassinated journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, and the touching tribute will actually last until the end of the month. So if you're in Luxembourg until 31st of March, you're going to be walking down Rue Daphne, which is something that is great, and as Daphne's sister Mandy Malia herself shared photos, it's quite surreal as well to see the name of a Maltese person on a road in Luxembourg. Unfortunately, of course, it's something that would be cool on any other circumstance were it not for what it's remembering. And in fact, Mandy Malia herself kind of left a little bit of a stark reminder in the post, saying, over 4 years on from her assassination, Malta has yet to honour its hero with something quite similar.
No, as a Maltese person as well as a journalist, it's honestly a proud moment to see a Maltese journalist, a female Maltese journalist at that, being, having such an incredible tribute to her in Luxembourg. And, as Mandy Malia said, the fact that we don't have anything of the sort in Malta, there's the makeshift memorial in Valletta that was very controversial, was cleaned up in the middle of the night for months on end back, a few years back. So let's hope that this is a bit of a signal to the Maltese government at the time is maybe to name a street, maybe have a monument to the slain Maltese journalist. Moving on to the next story, a bit of a funny story in the midst of all this chaos internationally and locally. Malta's Archbishop, I don't know if you've seen the footage. If you haven't, it's on our social media platforms. Malta's Archbishop Charles Cicluna, quite a popular guy, a very jovial guy. A lot of people love this guy. Recently tried to leave MDINA. However, he was blocked by a minister who was giving a speech, and the footage of this kind of encounters, it went a bit viral. It's quite funny. So Archbishop Charles Cicluna was, filmed trying to leave MDINA, the silent city, as Minister Julia FARRUGIA Portelli was giving a speech. He was talking about some plaques in the area, and I think that's all fine and well, except the speech was being given right in the entrance of MDINA, which is where cars, not only cars, people and also horse-drawn carriages pass from. I think everything had to be paused while FARRUGIA Portelli gave her speech, but the Archbishop wasn't really having it. Maybe he was late for an engagement, and you can see him coming out, speaking to some people, going back to the car before eventually being let through. A lot of people had a lot to say about this. I just found it funny, that, he did make it through after all, so maybe he had the power of the Lord on him that day.
Yeah, there's one specific moment where you could see that he's just about to burst out shouting, and I would have loved to be there to see the silent city being renamed by the Archbishop of all people. It's been a very interesting week as far as these political weird moments and memes go. I mean, we're on day 3 and we've already had Bernard Grech, Julia FARRUGIA Portelli being involved twice, Julia Zara, Ian Borch, Owen Bonnici. Stay tuned, because every single time that there's going to be something even remotely hilarious, it's going to be on TikTok and it's going to be on Lovin Malta's social media account. Anyway, from MDINA, just down the road to Ta'ali, actually, Malta may be 4,000 kilometers away from Moscow, but defiant acts of anti-war and specifically anti-Putin keep showing up and cropping up all around the islands. This latest one, captured by our very own Johnathan Cilia, actually, is a graffiti that simply states Putin, Hitler, just on the limits of Ta'ali, including a swiftly drawn swastika to boot, very close to the American embassy, actually. So I don't know whether that was intentional in any way, but it's there. It's a very, glaringly red on a classic Maltese rubble wall, and it's not even the first of its kind or of a sort of, very clear and very specific statement being made by anyone who might live in Malta. In fact, a life-sized cutout of Putin dressed eerily similar to Hitler, even sporting the notorious mustache, was actually erected outside the Russian embassy yesterday evening in a public protest where people in Malta were even chanting "Putin out, Putin out." So, I mean, there's small acts when you look at, this ongoing invasion, but clearly statements are being made in public now, even as far away as Malta.
Over the last few years in global politics, Putin has been kind of respected and seen as a man to kind of look up to for being so firm and strong among many people who are into politics. I think, with this graffiti, with this cutout of him looking like Hitler himself, it just goes to show how the tides are turning, and people who may have supported him before definitely do not anymore. And even the people who are neutral on him probably don't have a very positive view of him. So let us know in the comments what you think of the graffiti and the rest of the stories. We're going to cut to a quick video now, a pretty epic video actually that we produced to mark Women's Day, International Women's Day, which happened yesterday. If you didn't see it, check it out now. And to all the women out there, a very belated Happy Women's Day. And stay tuned for our interview with Emma Portelli Bonnici after the break.
I want to apologize
to all the women
I have called pretty.
Before I've called them intelligent
or brave.
I'm sorry.
I made it sound as though
something as simple as what you're born with
is the most you have to be proud of.
When your spirit has crushed mountains.
From now on, I will say things like,
You are resilient.
or you are extraordinary.
not because I don't think you're pretty,
But because you are so
Much more than
Than that.
And we're back on Lovin Daily. Today we've got PN candidate Emma Portelli Bonnici here with us. She'll be contesting on the 9th and 10th districts. Emma, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
So we wanted to bring you in a little bit. This isn't your first time on Lovin Daily, but obviously now you are a candidate for the election, and you're quite well-spoken, outspoken on a number of topics, some topics that are very important to us and our readers, including, better access to women's rights, better access to contraception as well. You're also, you've been public about your pro-choice positions. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know you, what are some of the main concerns and topics on your mind in this election season?
So essentially, the main topics that are on my mind, or the main topics that have been on my mind since I started being an activist. I've always been in favor of civil liberties, women's rights, sexual and reproductive health. These are all things that, as the news progresses and as our country progresses, I feel come to the fore more and more often. Even when it comes to something like femicide. The PN led the way on that front, even when the Minister for Justice had already completely shrugged the idea off. Women's rights groups have been lobbying for that for years and years and years, and we echoed that call, and we made that happen, because we genuinely believe in it. As soon as, obviously, Robert Abela needed a smokescreen, as per the usual, civil liberties were used as another smokescreen yet again. So this is something that women's rights, civil liberties, societal rights, these things should never be used to cover up shadiness. And yet, that's where we are. Complete U-turn on femicide, thankfully, obviously, because I want it to be in the law. That's why we proposed it in the first place.
You know, on the topic of femicide, you know, just a week ago, we had the unfortunate murder of Rita Elul, a Maltese mother in Gozo. You know, there were reports that, you know, she had made 2 domestic violence reports to the police. Now, we don't know the exact details. I'm sure it will come out in court. But kind of, what are your thoughts on this? And what do you think of Malta's approach to femicide and potential femicide reports?
In general, I feel like our approach to gender-based violence has always been lacking. It is not a problem that is solely upon the police, although reports do need to be taken with the adequate seriousness that they deserve and that they merit, but it is also a problem that extends to the courts. Things do not happen fast enough in our judicial system. This is no secret. Everyone who's ever been involved in anything remotely relating to the courts is well aware that there is a massive backlog. This is not the fault of our magistrates and our judges. This is a big problem. It's systemic in Malta, and it is something that needs to be solved holistically. There is no one-size-fits-all, you know, rubber stamp fix. You know, it's not going to happen like that. And we actually have proposals tackling this about court times in our manifesto, which is actually published.
There you go. We'll get to that soon. So I want to jump back to your districts, the 9th and 10th districts, important districts. What are some of the issues that these districts specifically are facing?
Honestly, the fact that they're such massive districts, and I find them to be both very diverse. So they're big, and they range from MDINA Marina, right, all the way up to San Juan, to Tajbish, Slema, Gzira. And there's so much diversity within those districts. It's not just, you know, it's not just Slema or Pembroke, as people like to think. There's Madlena, there's Sweetie, it's huge. To say that there are only a few problems plaguing the people in those districts would be falling short of the reality. But I think some common threads in what I find when I speak to people. The environment is a big issue. What happened with the Fortina project in Baluta was a big problem. Yeah, I was there alongside a lot of other colleagues. Again, very grateful that we've U-turned on that as well, just like Marsa Scala, even though that's not within my district. I know that the entire country would have been affected. A lot of these issues are a problem. And then there's also infrastructure. So Slema and a lot of the surrounding areas have infrastructure that's very old, that hasn't been brought in line with modern times. Water, electricity, these kind of things. Okay. And these are big problems as well that like to crop up when people are building, when people have floods, pipes, all of these things. Then, of course, we just mentioned Rita Elul, but I can't possibly talk about my district without remembering Paulina. I grew up going to Independence Gardens. That was where there was like a little helicopter thing that you could climb up. That's where my parents used to take me when I was young, and that was a safe place. When I was older, I used to go there with friends. You know, you get some beers, and you go there after junior college, and you drink there. We used to swim there. I still spend my summers there. Well, I used to before what happened this year. And I found it very hard to go back now. And I know that a lot of women my age are feeling exactly that feeling. That we are no longer safe in taxis. We're no longer safe in public parks. We're no longer safe in the daylight. And these are things that do need to be tackled. And they're long, long overdue. We have been saying this for years and years and years. Today's the day after Women's Day. These are things that we've actually pledged. Better security, better surveillance, people who are more accessible when you need them, and also, in general, gender equality as a general proposal.
Have you been to Independence Gardens since the beginning of the year?
No, I haven't managed. I had COVID when the vigil happened, so obviously I couldn't go. The next day, a friend of mine called me from there, so I got to be there without physically being there. And I managed to walk past with my dog, but again, from the promenade, not actually go down.
So, a lot of people that live in the town and the region, are they avoiding the gardens after what happened?
A lot of women I've spoken to are indeed avoiding it, because it now contains a lot of negativity, and I think that will start to go away only once we've actually started providing solutions to the various problems.
So what can be done maybe in Independence Gardens or in general gardens? What do you foresee? A security guard, cameras?
In general, I think what is most pertinent is that we remember that we are all part of a society and that we need to look out for one another. we live together. This is not this individualistic nature that we've come to expect is very, very harmful on a multitude of levels. This ranges from something big, like what happened to Paulina, to something small, like seeing a dog or a cat with a collar running around outside. I mean, just last week, I was driving to a meeting. I was actually with my mum in the car, which made it much easier to stop. And this little dog was running down Regional Road. I'm obsessed with dogs, like it's a thing. And he's just running and running and running. And obviously Regional Road is packed with traffic. And I sort of pulled over, got out, managed to take a photo of him. My mum uploaded it to Rab's Puppy Love. I tried to grab him, he was not having it. He was terrified. And his owner actually found him within the hour, which is amazing. And it's something so small. His name actually happened to be Charlie as well, same as my dog. So I thought it was really sweet, and she texted me. Just these tiny acts of kindness, not brushing things off, actually caring about what happens to the people around you, not being individualistic, actually looking around and seeing how you can help people without, it doesn't even take that much. Like, what did it take out of my day? 3 minutes?
Mm-hmm. So just finally, just on the Paulina Demska issue, do you think anything could have been done to avoid that?
I don't think we can ever say with certainty that even with 1 million security guards in the area, she would have been saved. That's not something we can say, that's purely speculative. But there are things we can do. We can mitigate the risks, we can educate, because that is the crux of everything at the end of the day. The patriarchal society in which we live, the tenements of this society are held up by a lack of education in this regard. How we accept catcalling as par for the course, how we talk about what women are wearing when something negative happens to them, how you see an article about when that boat got stuck when the ship got stuck in Egypt and everyone was blaming that female captain. Mm-hmm. You remember that? I know there was a Lovin Daily article about it. All of these small things that all add up to a culture of, honestly, impunity in this regard, that allows people to get away with tiny things that eventually allows them to get away with bigger things, like that.
So you mentioned education, and I actually wanted to bring that up a little bit. So on the topic of sexual health, contraceptives, you've called for easier access to contraceptives for people in Malta. Does that come hand in tandem with a new education reform, a new information campaign? Because, okay, it's all well and good giving contraceptives out to young people or whatever, but if they're not really informed of what they're doing or what they're expected of them, will it be effective?
Well, no. That's why the PN proposed this last May, because again, we don't use women's rights as an electoral promise. These are actually things we believe in. We proposed this last May, that's nearly a year ago, when we proposed free contraception in any way, shape or form. So we're not only talking about condoms, we're talking about the IUD, we're talking about the implant. Because again, contraception is not a one-size-fits-all. What might work for me might not work for another woman. What might work for you might not work for someone else. And this is a reality, one which we are aware of and one which we are tackling. Further to that, we're also proposing a comprehensive and intersectional sexual health campaign for the education aspect of it, because again, I totally agree with you. One cannot exist without the other, at least not effectively. And more than that, we're also proposing an extension of the GU Clinic, because as we know, the GU Clinic, for all their positives, because the people who work there truly are wonderful, wonderful people, they cannot keep up with the demand. That's the reality. And we have some of the highest incidence rates of STIs and STDs in I believe, in Europe. We have some of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in Southern Europe. These are things that need to be tackled. And the last time I read up on this, I mean, I know that before the last election, this was actually proposed. And then eventually, recently, it came to light that the research they were using was from 2015 and they had to get rid of it, scrap it and start from scratch. Okay. I mean, how mediocre is that? Like, let's do better. And we are actually proposing better.
So I wanted to ask you about a topic that I think was been in the news yesterday. I saw some people talking about tampons, and that they should also be subsidized, if not free. So this is not exactly sexual. This is more about hygiene, personal hygiene products. So what's your view on that? Should products like tampons be subsidized or free?
Again, I can already hear that once this is published, the first things people are going to say are like, tampons. And actually, a couple of days ago, a Labour minister was called out. Someone said, I'm not actually going to repeat it here, about putting tampons where they go.
Saw that, yes.
You know, I mean, I can't even. But beyond that, beyond the lack of education that has become increasingly obvious, especially when you see comments like that, yes, we are completely on board with making progress in this regard. We understand that gender inequality is not just, sexual health and reproductive rights. It's not just the gender pay gap, which still exists, which is why Proposal 54, it's actually somewhere here, I put a tab on it because it's my favorite one, is actually about decreasing the disparities between men and women with an emphasis on the gender pay gap, but not only. That's why it's broad. It's written specifically in a broad way so that you can include things like tampon tax. Should they be subsidized? Should they be completely free? Remains to be seen. Okay. We don't need to put every single thing down. The general vision is there. That's exactly what we want people to elect us on, the vision.
And just on this topic, a few people were saying, okay, all well and good, but shouldn't we be focusing on medicines for diabetes or some other condition first? Does that take priority, or are they two things that can happen kind of at the same time?
They can completely happen at the same time. The only reason that one could not happen at the same time is if you don't have a plan for the economy. We know that currently Malta, number one, we have a massive deficit. And two, Labour in government have not built a single new pillar for the economy. Without having built a new pillar for the economy, how can they then guarantee that things will be free? One does not go without the other. How are you giving away freebies without telling us where you're going to generate this wealth from? That's why our manifesto starts with our vision, with 10 new pillars for the economy. And with those 10 pillars, it then becomes tangible to say that we can do this. We can do this. We don't need to pick between sexual health and diabetes. People who are diabetic deserve their medicines. People who need free contraception deserve that. And we know exactly what happens when we don't have free contraceptives. The statistics I mentioned earlier are no joke. They're very concerning. And we obviously do need to make a change on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming towards the end of the interview, you mentioned the 10 pillars. Mm-hmm. Is one of those your favorite? Do you have one that kind of stands out to you personally?
I don't. I love all of them. I think they are all an amazing way forward for Malta. I think thinking outside of the box has always been a strength of the PN. From maritime to aviation to pharmaceutical industry, these have all been things that were championed by PN in government. These are things that we can continue to champion, continue to grow upon, and then have 10 new ones as well. So that Maltese youths especially those 70% that want to leave, might perhaps want to stay.
And finally, for people that are watching, where can they find you? And for people who are in your district, finally, what's the main reason they should vote for Emma Portelli Bonnici?
I think I do politics differently. And I do politics differently specifically because I believe in what I'm doing. I believe that we need a change. And I believe that I can be that change. And you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever really. If you want, we can even go for coffee and you can find me at coffee. So there's that too.
So listen guys, if you're up for taking up that invitation, drop her a line on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere she mentioned. Once again, Emma, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Guys, let us know in the comments below what you think of this candidate, if you agree or disagree with her policies, or if there's anything that you believe that she should be concerned about. As always, from myself and the Love of Malta team, have an evening full of lovin'.